Hey, welcome back. This is a new video. I'm going to be making a set of saddlebags. I'm going to be working for the first time on video in my new leather shop, which is the upstairs of the horse barn that I just finished. It's not quite done yet, but the upstairs is in working order. The downstairs is still being turned into shops. And here you see my selection of Phantom Rider boots. I love these boots. Some of them are much more worn out than others. And here is my beautiful shop that I'm so proud to be able to work inside of. And this is a piece of 10-ounce chestnut, English Bridle. Chestnut is the color. This is from Weaver Leather. And here I am working on, if you've seen my recent few videos from the summer, this table that I made a few months ago. And then in the background you'll see the chest of drawers there on the right. This shop also is dust free, which is really nice. This piece of leather was in my old shop, so there's a little bit of sawdust on it. I start by deciding what shape I'm going to make. And I just grabbed a piece of scrap craft paper and I just begin to sketch out a concept. And I'm making saddlebags, and this is my memory impression of what a saddlebag shape is. Of course I did Google it, but this was really the impression that I had in my mind. And I'm just getting a vibe for the shape and the size. And I'm just using paper right now, but you'll notice how I always fold it in half so I can get a symmetrical down the center shape. It's just like making a paper heart when we were little kids. And now this is the shape I'm happy with. I'm just really honestly thinking it through. And now I'm going to just rough cut chunks out of this 10-ounce leather. Some people would razor blade those shapes out. I just know there's an easier way. And I want, oh, there's Junior scurrying around in the background. And I want nice, clean cuts that are all the same. Sometimes when you cut with a razor blade, it almost looks like it's hacked at or whittled, especially with this deep leather, this thick leather. So I give it a light spray glue with M77 from 3M. And the spray glue is really just a mist. It keeps them from sliding on each other. And some people in a million years would never think to put spray glue on the finished side of leather. But it rubs off, especially if I was going to wax it later, it would rub off. And that's what you see me doing there with my hand quickly. I rubbed it and it gets all the little pills off. And now with my dividers made by Ben Snur. It was a birthday gift to me from a few years ago. And I'm doing the dividers there. I'm separating what's going to become the punch holes, and you'll notice I'm marking from the edge of each side, so if there's a discrepancy it ends up in the middle on the bottom. It will be easier to hide as opposed to starting from one side and going all the way up to the other side and then ending up with an odd shape. And I got lucky enough to have pretty good spacing down at the bottom, but I never take my chances. I always start at the very edge and work my way down to the middle. Same thing on the opposite side. I obviously have to make two of these, so I'm doing one and then the other and then one and then the other. And now I'm cutting the sides. I'm going to make the sides 3 inches wide. I'm using my cutting mat all the time to make sure I'm making straight parallel cuts. I'm using those lines on the cutting mat. And now to get the spacing of the holes on the side, which I don't know how to do mathematically, so I just do it practically, I make this pink foam insulation base for me to work against. It's just a quick bandsaw cutout with the same paper pattern, and I lay my sides against it, and I make it just a little smaller so the sides go underneath the front, and with my marking tool I'm laying out the spacing, and now I'm punching out those holes, and I have that piece of tape on there to mark the center. And now here I'm pretty good, not perfect, but I'm pretty good. And now I'm selecting a piece of leather that's going to become the back of each one of the sides. And so I didn't use up a lot of the leftover leather. I decided to make it from two sides, two pieces with a stitch down the middle. And you'll see ultimately for it to fit on the Vespa I needed to space it further apart. So I put a little spacer in the middle, which will become clear later on. And just like I did before, I trust the bandsaw more than I trust my razor skills on this 10-ounce thick leather. So again, I just did light spray glue between the two pieces, and now here they are. And I'm making the holes 3 more holes longer on both sides than the front panel so that the sides come up at an angle to the back, and it'll become clear what I'm talking about in a few minutes. So these holes I just randomly punch. There's nothing to match them to just yet, but when I do the sides, I'm going to have to mark them, and you'll see how I do the sides, how I mark them in a minute, just so that the holes as close as possible match up. And I'm doing the same thing where I'm coming down from my marking down to the middle. And here you see what I was just talking about. I have the leather laid out, and this is the positioning of this side, and I mark so I know that the pieces that I've marked are all going to stay together. And with the Sharpie, I'm able to put a dot basically where each one of the holes is going to be punched. Use the spacer so that it's all parallel from the edge. And I'm punching all the holes with my Josh Fick mallet. Thank you, Josh. I got that mallet from Josh Fick at Maker Camp. And if you haven't been to Maker Camp yet, you're missing out. Again, just punching holes for the side. And I left it long. Here you could clearly see how the front panel, which is on the right side of the strip, versus the back panel, which is on the left side of the strip. The back panel is going to have a longer set of holes so that the front bevels up to the back. And now the lace, I thought I had enough, but I didn't. So I had to make lace, and I had to find the brown that worked nicely with the few pieces I had already done. I talked about it on my Patreon. And so now here I am. And a lot of people were curious during Patreon and during Instagram, does this hurt my hands? It doesn't. This is a lot easier than doing a saddle stitch with a set of needles. With these big holes, all I have to do is cut a nice taper in the end of the lace, and I'm able to just do it. The hardest part was remembering what goes over what, where to start and where to stop, and which hole goes over what hole, which hole goes through first, so that my lapping is consistent, so that my X's, so for instance, the same angle is always under the opposite angle when you go 1 to 1 to 1. But I also realized that no one's going to be able to tell if I made a mistake in the middle of it. But also just by doing it the same over and over, I get a rhythm. You begin to start to do it automatically, and you're not stopping and thinking, which is kind of annoying because you stop to think, you're like, oh, which hole do I have to go in now? But once you develop a pattern, like when it's in this direction, I always go over. And there you can see up close. I'm very proud of this. I was a little nervous, not sure exactly how this was going to land. And I came up with a technique to hide the end of each stretch of thread. I'm going to discuss that in a couple seconds in the moment. So I do both back panels before I start doing one of the front panels. And so the front panel, I just jumped in there and said, let me see what happens. I didn't really have a plan. I just laced this up like a set of sneakers. And then this is the end of my stitch. I don't tie it into a knot. I just let it go long. And then the next piece of leather just goes right through the next set of holes. And then it grabs the loose ends. And then I just trap the loose ends inside the next series of stitches. You can see it right here. And I just keep carrying on, and from the outside it remains the same. I just have to remember which way I keep going. Every stitch starts where I go in the top first, and then the bottom next. And then I'm making sure that my X's on the inside are grabbing the tails of the previous thread. And here you can see side there. And that's how I just keep going with whatever piece I have. And now I'm grooving on the front panel. I got a rhythm. I know what I need to do. And you can see how the sides run a little long. They're a little choppy looking, but I'm going to cut them into shape. And there it is. I'm really happy. And here you can see me taking a risk and freehand cutting that. And now it's clear to see what I mean by having the back stitches a little longer than the front stitches, so that it creates that upshot, and it gives the bag a little bit of gravity, makes it feel like it's got some weight to it, some weight in it, because it doesn't have just a straight top. I'm using my Weaver Skiver chisel, Skiver knife, and it's really nice when it just moves through that thick leather just like that. It's a really nice sound and a really nice feeling. And now I'm doing what I do. I reflect. I get to a certain point of a project and I look and I go, damn, that came out better than I expected. Time to screw it up by doing the next step. Here I am taking a chance on the tops or the flaps, and it's obviously has to happen. I can't avoid it. I can't just say, okay, I'm done. A lot of the same thing. I'm laying out my spacing on my holes, which is just about a 1/2 inch, but with the girth of the hole punch, they seem closer together. And I punch all the holes across the tops of each one of those, and then I lay them in place so that I can somewhat match the placement. And there I'm using an awl to mark the spacing. And I have to do 2 sets of holes. I did experiment off camera a little bit, and I realized I do need 2 sets of holes. So this is why I'm confidently nailing in 1 set of holes, and then after trying to stitch it, I realized I need 2 sets of holes. And so here I'm putting one right below it. And by adding a second set of holes, it gives me the ability to create the stitching pattern that I had envisioned, which is a straight on one end right there, and then an X all the way across to another straight end. So I'm doing every other hole stitch. If I had to do a stitch where it was between every hole, I'd have to put 2 sets of laces inside every other hole, which would have been too tight. So here you have X's every other space across one side and in between on the opposite side. And now you can see I got already one done, and now I'm just finishing up the end of the other. This lacing pattern is something I've never done before with this thick leather. I just envisioned it. It's in my sketchbook. I'll show it on Patreon. What I was thinking when I first started thinking about this, I envisioned this heavy thread to give it some texture. I could only imagine if I went right to a sewing machine with this, it would be fairly boring to look at, not to mention boring to watch being made. And I did a test shot on my Vespa, and I noticed that I needed a little bit more space for these to flop over to the left and the right, and that's why I give myself a 3-inch panel in the middle. And just like I said, it gives it a little bit more visual interest seeing another set of stitches down the middle, which will be really nice to see them all worn in and flattened out. And I don't know if you could see it in any of these fast forward clips, but I hammer the leather down. I hammer the stitching so it flattens out. Couldn't do it on the seams where it's on the corners, but right here on the back. And then I use a little PVA glue just to keep them from untying. And that'll dry clear and soft. And now here I am. And intentionally I chose a couple of pieces of scrappy leather for the throw over part, for that bridge in between. So you'll notice there's holes and stuff in it. Now it's time to make the buckles. I always get nervous when I make buckles because this is right where you screw up a good project. And just like I said before, you finish a step, you're like, that's awesome, but it's so far from being done. I still have so many more opportunities to destroy this project. So every step you take, it's kind of like, I'm a big fan of watching people climb Mount Everest, and I would never do it ever in my life. But the idea of doing a big project like this with pricey materials is my own mini Mount Everest, where you get to base camp and you're like, okay, that's cool. I wish I could be done. No, you got to go to the next base camp, and those are each one of the steps of the project. I know it's a horrible comparison, but that's how I feel when I get to a good step and I'm like, boy, I wish it could be done because it's so good right now. But you keep moving and you just say, screw it. If it messes up, I'll make it again. I made it one time, I can make it again. You just got to develop that confidence. And now this is just a little branding. This is where the belt's going to flap through the buckle and then land inside that little retainer strap. And I thought it would be a good opportunity. And I do a little scarf joint. And now this is really important when you do these types of things, to have an anvil inside. You can't just do that in midair. And if I had a plan better, I could put those holes in. Now this is, say I consider this my prototype. If I was ever going to make this again, I know I can plan for these holes. I can plan for the logo that I'm going to put in later. I can plan for all this stuff. But here I was just prototyping and freestyling, so I didn't know exactly where these holes were going to land. So if I made this again, I could possibly make this a laser pattern and then just laser cut all the holes and everything right into it. And now here you are. I got the buckles on both sides. I'm really digging it. It's really nice. I wish my Harley was here. It's at my brother's house. So I don't do a beauty shot on the Harley. I do a beauty shot on the Vespa. But looking up close, again, like I said, I'm at base camp 10 and I did not screw it up yet. I still have 2 more hurdles to get to the peak. And you'll see what they are in a minute. And now here I am laser cutting the brand. This is the brand logo for Phantom Rider. It's this flaming skull. And I'm cutting it into Corian. I'm cutting all the negative shapes so that the actual positive shape will be pushed into the leather. And there you can see I'm etching it. That's a piece of Corian, a 1/2 inch thick Corian. And that's usually what I make my leather stamps out of, because I'm not stamping more than a few of anything. I've done hundreds and hundreds of keychains with a Corian stamp and it still looks good. It's probably time to make a new one, but in general, you do 2 or 3 stamps and they stay nice and sharp. When you do 200, that's when you start losing edges. And you'll notice I CA glued it to this big chunk of wood. That's so that this Corian stamp can break, and I have broken them in the past. Now I'm just doing a test shot on my fly press at my other shop, because the fly press is at the shop where the laser cutter is. And here I'm just doing a little test. I can't bring the bags over here. The bag probably wouldn't fit in there anyway, so I have another solution to do these back over at the house shop. And there you go. That impression works. This is the second one I did, so I knew it was going to look good. And there it is. There's the Phantom Rider. And now this is my 10-inch Lamco vise, which I got from England. Clive Lamb, a Black Sheep Cross member on Instagram, made this. He made 10 of them, and I own one of the 10. And he made them himself in his own machine shop. And I'm using it as my hydraulic press right here, or my flywheel. And I back it with wood so I don't get the teeth of the vise jaw inside the leather. And here with my big giant, I'm letting it sit there so that the leather relaxes into the stamp. Yeah, look at that. That's nice. I interrupted myself there. And I got a nice impression on both flaps. And I'm very happy with it. Subtle branding. I didn't want to go crazy with the branding. I also didn't want to laser etch it in. Something about laser etching in looks cheap to me. Here we are on my Vespa in the downstairs of the horse barn. You can see some old projects in the background. That's my boat. So this feels comfortable on the Vespa. If I was running around New York City with this like I used to. And now for some beauty shots. I'm back up in the shop just playing around. I'm using the Pocket 3, which works amazingly well. If you haven't gotten one and you're thinking about it, it's got good up close focus, as you can see. You can see some of the branding. And thank you very much. You can follow me on Patreon for behind the scenes. I always show moment by moment when I have ups and downs with any given project. Thank you very much for hanging out. I really appreciate you guys.